HARP, episode number 151, Playing Your Way. I am Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, a composer, mentor, creative. We both play the harp, and that is why we call this Jung at Harp. And almost every week, we come together to have a conversation about a question. We don't come with answers, but we come with questions to explore together. And we invite you to join in if you are listening live. You can type in a question or whatever platform you're watching. And if everything works right technologically, it will show up and we'll be able to bring that into the conversation. So, Deborah, do you want to jump in here with why we chose to talk about this?
Yeah, and we also had the title was slightly longer. It was playing your way to freedom and joy.
Yes.
And the way we were talking about it in terms, and you had said that I'm about to give a class at the Somerset Harp Festival this summer in creating a performance that connects. And we were talking about that connection. And you were talking about that one of your goals this summer is to play a 20-minute set and what the anxieties are that come up for you. And I had just last night been listing the anxieties that come up for people when they think they're performing.
Mm-hmm.
And when, like one of the things I didn't say is different people have anxieties in different situations. So, for example, I had this dog who was very anxious in the home, but the minute he was in a car, he was very, very calm and comfortable. So he would not be friendly with people in our home or on the street, but if he was in a car with somebody, he'd let them pet him and he would be friendly. I am that way on stage. When I'm on stage, I feel completely comfortable. Like I'm not worried about stepping on anybody's toes. I'm not worried about being too big or too loud. Nothing's in the way. I can just feel comfortable, whether there's nobody in the audience or there's 10,000 people in the audience. Like literally a stage before anybody's in the theater, I will feel that way on that stage, as well as when the theater is full. But in a party, or even in a one-on-one, I will get very anxious when I'm sharing or talking. So we were talking about, how does this happen? What are the things that get in our way? And what's sort of the difference between a performance, a recital, and a conversation, or a performance, a recital, and sharing? And we were talking about the roles. When you take on that role of performer, does it give you a sense of comfort, or does that make you anxious? So these were all the reasons why we chose this.
Yeah, yes, and we were talking about how do we be authentic. That was another word that came up, is to be authentic and to play your way, to play my way to freedom and joy means I have to be authentic.
Right.
And part of the imagery for me that I often invoke in my professional work is that there is this light that is like I'm the ray of a divine, just like you're a ray of the divine. And my life's purpose is to stay in my ray, is to let that light shine. And how do I stay in that light instead of trying to go over here and be in your light or this person's light? And it gets so hard because comparing ourselves and the learning process, learning often involves imitation. Learning often involves trying on roles that feel uncomfortable. And there's a place for all of that and value in all of that. But to truly find freedom and joy, to be authentic, means just that. It means being authentic. It means being able to say, that doesn't work for me. Or, okay, well, I see how their light takes them in that direction and that cloak, that role, that way of being. But that's not what my light's taking me to. That my energy has a much stronger, a different face, is what I want to say in the moment. It's got a different way of being. And So staying in, and again, I often associate that image of staying in my light with staying in my center. Like, how do I move from my center instead of getting caught up in my head and thinking about all these things? I had this image this morning, then I'll be quiet. I had this image of five options, 5 ways of moving. And then I thought about how the pentagram, the 5-pointed star, is the sign of the microcosm, which is humanity or the individual. So that the top point of the star is the head, and then these 2 points of the star are the arms, and then the bottom 2 are the legs. And so I was thinking about this thing of moving authentically and the middle way. And I thought, okay, so my head can imagine and project I go in a certain way. But then here I have 2 arms that if they get off the center, they're going to be reaching for something here and something here. And I'm not going to stay with what my own larger mind wants. And then my legs, if I'm looking over here and looking over here, they're going to take me in all sorts of different directions and get me off that center path. So I was thinking about that in my own life and some situations about how do I say, okay, arms, come back here. Let's reach forward toward this center path, this light of where my energy's going. Let's put my legs going in that direction. I don't know if that resonates for you or anybody who's listening.
Well, it's really, there's so many things that came out to me. I mean, one of the first things that I thought of was something that a friend of mine pointed out many years ago, and it's obvious, but is that we are symmetrical side to side, but not top to bottom. And it was very interesting that the star is the representative of being symmetrical side to side, but not top to bottom. So that was one of the first things I thought when you were speaking. But then I was also thinking about how in Hip Harp Academy the other day, we were talking in the chat about how, or I was kind of pointing out how one of the things that can be very difficult about being an adult learner, which everyone in the academy is, well, not everyone, some people started HARP. Anyway, we won't go into that. But I'm an adult learner, and there's many things I'm expert at, and there's many things that I'm not expert at. Mm-hmm. But as an adult, I have a sophisticated eye, meaning I can see that I am not like that person, and if it should I not be able to see that, there are numbers like in social media that can easily point me to the fact that I am not like that person.
Right.
And so unlike when we're children and we're doing make-believe or we're creating something in which we're just not comparing ourselves to something else, it's new and we're embodying it, as adults, we are actually fighting this sophisticated ear and the sophisticated eye of what it means to be good. So that was in my ear in what you were saying. And then I was thinking about make believe and being a kid, and I wanted to be Leonard Bernstein. And I mean, it's not that I wanted to be Leonard Bernstein, but there was a model that was Leonard Bernstein. It was a composer. It was a person who was talking about music in a way that everybody could understand, but they were breaking it apart. So they were both creating music for other people, musicals, serious music, and they were on a stage performing and connecting with people. So that was my model of like, that's the thing that I want to be. Mm-hmm. And I could see it in a couple other people, but I could specifically see it in him. And it didn't occur to me that I couldn't be Leonard Bernstein or that I had to be different. I just started doing all the things. I started writing musicals and thinking about music that way and getting on stage. That's what I started doing. And then I can see that so that made sense, and that kind of infused who I am, and it made everything that I am. Well, now if I try to do something like, well, I would like to be somebody who is has a lot of connection on Instagram. Okay, I'm looking to the right and I'm looking to the left, and this person is doing this and this person is doing that and this person is doing it better, and oh, that person is doing it like this and I can see that. It's a completely different experience, and it is not fun, and it is full of assessment rather than embodiment and joy and play. And what I'm teaching, as well as what I'm learning in the world, what I'm working to learn and teach, is how to actually get to that play, to the performance that connects, not the performance that shows that I'm good enough, because who cares?
Right.
And one of the things that's beautiful, I was reading up last night about the difference between a recital and a performance. And a recital is generally somewhere where you're trying to show your skill, whereas a performance is open. It can be anything. I could perform with this pen, feats of magic, or feats of stupidity, or whatever feats I wanted to perform. It's just a kind of like a holder. And I mean, I have a lot of that experience in my head because my teacher, Tony, was a teacher for a lot of physical comedians, and a lot of physical comedians will make performances of amazing daring do with absolutely nothing, and in fact, my teacher Tony was a mime, and so he literally had nothing, used nothing. So I have it in my head that performance is some, I don't know, it's something about opening up the magic of simplicity, the magic of seeing something new, the help, I just got lost.
Well, but I think that, part of DHC, what I'm hearing you working to flesh out, as I am working to flesh out, and we're working to flesh out together, is what makes the difference between playing music and sharing it where you're connected to yourself, and thus it connects to your audience. And that there is a performance that can be a performance that's about, here's how I am connected to what I'm offering and what I'm sharing, in hopes that maybe it resonates for you and you connect, whether it's music or it's the magic with the pen or whatever, versus here I'm going to show you how good I am, performance or recital.
Yeah, and I would love to bring in a comment, because I think it's going to open up. Are there archetypes of music? And I think there's what I love about this in relationship to what you just said, is, am I good enough? As we compare ourselves to other people, you tell me, because I know archetypes are a big part of Jungian. I do believe that archetypes or myths, I've just been listening to Stephen Fry read tell the stories of all the myths. And while they're gods and goddesses and blah, 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 they're not people I would compare myself to, because they're mythical. But they do provide, like John is asking, like for me, Leonard Bernstein was an archetype. He was the person who was both a teacher and a creator and a performer. But by teacher, I mean a breaker downer, like almost like a scientist, someone who makes the understanding of something accessible, and a creator of marvelous works, and a performer. It was an archetype for me. Nowadays, I think people are like, what are you doing? I mean, you write musicals and you do this, and to them it seems like a separate things. But for me, it is that archetype, and it gives me freedom to express myself.
Yeah, so the term archetype is used in very, very different ways. So I just want to say, from a Jungian perspective, in terms of Jungian psychology, the archetype means a universal template that is the picture or vision of an instinct. So that in Jungian psychology, every archetype, which is the universal template or vision or image, manifests in an instinct, which is a biological prompted drive or impulse or desire. Now, philosophically, the term archetype, of course, dates way back to Plato and what he had to say in terms of are there overarching energy templates or currents, is how I'm going to say it. And so I think we could all agree that there is probably an overarching template or current of the archetype of music. And then would argue, if we're playing with the term philosophically, that then we might say that each key or mode on the harp, each mode is an expression of a sub archetype. Because, the key of B flat, the mode of B flat, has a very different resonance and evokes a very different cellular, physical, affective feeling response than, say, the key of D or the mode of D, Dorian, right? Mm-hmm. You help me. I may be mixing up terms here.
It doesn't matter that we get it right. I mean, it's you're talking about looking through a slightly different lens at something. Yeah.
Because the other thing that Jung says psychologically is that if you're in the presence of an archetype psychologically, then you are at once having an emotion and a corresponding image. That those two things come together. If you are again, talking psychologically about archetypes, if I'm in the presence of an archetype, of a numinous energy center, I'm going to be having an emotion. My body's going to be activated. I'm going to be having an affect, and I'm going to have an image that comes to mind that corresponds with that. And so,
can I just go back and explain what a numinous? So my favorite word since I discovered it has been noumenon, which is a thing in itself as separate from how it shows up physically in any particular moment. So it's like a blueprint, but on a complete dimensional scale, many dimensions of scale. And I was excited when Kathleen told me that it's actually part of the whole Jungian whatever you call it. What I'm hearing you say is that an archetype is like a numinous. It is the thing in itself that then resonates physically. You have a physical experience. You light up to it. It's almost like it's something that you light up to. Well, I would just like to say that, so for me, there was a numinous experience of what the Leonard Bernstein thing was. That was not just Leonard Bernstein, but was actually a throwback to what I would have it that a complete musician would be. They would be performing themselves, embodying something. They would be opening up the secrets of something so anyone could understand it. And they would be creating works such that would open that in others. And that's what I took on, but there's no name for it. So you can't say, well, yes, I'm a three-headed thing.
Well, you could, but the three-headed dog is the guardian of the underworld and the god.
I know.
But I want to say this about, again, if we're playing with it, if I'm going to apply the psychological teaching of Jung to it, for you, Leonard Bernstein embodied the archetype of the musician. And Jung is very clear. There's a difference between the archetype and an archetypal image or archetypal representation. Again, the archetype is the essence in itself. The archetypal image or myth or story or embodiment, i.e. Leonard Bernstein, is not the actual archetype, but their representation of it.
Right, exactly.
And through representations, we then often, our own personal subjective self, can connect with that archetype consciously to where then the expression of that archetype that is specific to us can flow through us.
So, okay, so this is really interesting, because I feel like quite naturally that archetype made perfect sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
But it, since there's no name for it, it does not make sense in a, like a marketing standpoint.
Well, when we get to marketing, that's another whole kind of thing, isn't it? But you know what? I mean, yeah, I mean, if we want to talk about that, we can. But let me say this before we go down that rabbit hole. What I just said to you, I'm going to really hold on to, and I'm going to go back and watch this, because I have committed to play a 20-minute set with my professional folk musician husband and a friend of his, and a house concert the end of this month. And, for those of you who play and perform all the time, 20 minutes, you're probably thinking that's nothing, but yeah, for me, it's a big deal. But what I'm going to remember is that I'm going to stop, and every time now that I practice or rehearse with them for this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to stop and I'm going to imagine you, because for me, you are an embodiment of the archetype of musician. And I'll call to mind Leonard Bernstein and maybe Paul McCartney, because he gets a lot of press in my house. John's always, and I think Leo Kottke right now too is getting a lot of press in my house. But I'm going to stop and I'm going to see where someone resonates with me that has that archetype, and then I'm going to just ask that I can just allow that energy to come through me in the way it's supposed to come through me. I'm going to stop and really intentionally center myself and remind myself I'm not doing this disconnected from the archetype of the musician, but I'm doing it connected, wanting to connect to the archetype of the musician that's specific to me. Because you, Leo Kottke, Paul McCartney, Leonard Bernstein are all very different musicians, but very similar musicians. You have so much that we could say is there for all of you that's common, but yet it's fleshed out in very different ways. And to play your way to freedom and joy, for me to play my way to freedom and joy, somehow that archetype has to get fleshed out in a way that's specific to the individual I am, that you are, that John is, or whomever is watching us is.
Yeah, and what I was really kind of came to me as you were speaking is, one of the things that stops people from performing is, am I good enough? But let me just step back and say that in my academy, it's all about breakthrough, people breaking through, or having breakthroughs. And, everybody's at a different level, but they're all having breakthroughs. And one person had a breakthrough last week, and came and shared it. She said, I played for my family. Why did I never do that? I played a concert for my family and it was wonderful. And she was like glowing. And what I was thinking about when you were speaking was that when you are looking at the archetype rather than at something specific, at a specific person, there's nothing in an archetype that says, and you got to do this good, and you got to be the best, and you got to make no mistakes, and you better not ever get any worse, and whatever it is, all those things. And so you get to be the thing without having to prove anything about it. And I think that's where it connects with the make-believe of a child.
Yeah, you get to be in the energy flow. You get to be, and this maybe we'll talk about in 2 weeks. Maybe we'll talk about flow and glide, because because I think that the child in play, and when as adults we play, we let ourselves go in the flow of the energy, the imaginal archetypal image. We go with it. And as adults, we so often want to be there, but we're constantly interrupting it. you know?
I was just thinking about this. I was thinking I've had all these sort of amazing conversations in the last couple of days, and I don't know if they started this with this one, but I was at a game night called Authentic Relating Ottawa, and one of the games that we played was What If? And we went off in a group and we were like, what if we could, like, what if you discovered you were a fairy godmother and you could grant people wishes? And like, would you bring your anxieties with you? Would you be like, what if I would grant the wrong wish and it makes them miserable? Like, am I responsible for that? Like, it just depends on, what happens. But one person said at one point, what if I had no self-doubt? And we were all like, whoa, what would that be like? And I've thought about that, since then, and taken it on for a minute, like, wow, what would that feel like? Now, why did I just bring that up right now, Kathleen? I felt that it was related to something that you just said about, and I think it's, again, the archetype has no assessment in it.
Right. And the self-doubt interrupts the glide that one's intention and desire to be in the flow of the archetype sets in motion. I mean,
can you just say that again? The self-doubt and the
self-doubt interrupts the
assessment.
glide, that forward movement
Mm-hmm.
that the intention of allowing that archetype to flow through us sets in motion. So that self-doubt not only interrupts the flow, but it also
It interrupts the action. So,
yes.
the three different things are coming in. I'm trying to manage all those because we were talking about glide, which we will talk about more because it's a big concept in my life right now. And you were can you just say that the definition that you gave me, because it was just really beautiful. It was about, it's about the follow through on an effort. So glide is different than flow in that glide is really allowing that effort, allowing the resonance of an effort. It's like the difference between when you play a note, you can let it ring, and especially if you have a series of notes that are harmonic, or you can stop it.
Right.
And now there's a lot of effort. I'm keeping efforting and stopping. And this is,
yes,
one is not better than the other in music. It's a choice. But when I'm hoping to glide in life and I keep not gliding, I keep interrupting my glide, that's not, well, it's not what I want, and people aren't getting to see me. So what I'm hearing is, when we put all these things together, that we have the archetype that has no assessment, that has no qualitative, you got to be this good. It's just a thing to be, to make believe. Then we want to experience the glide by, when we take that on, who we then get to be, and what do we then share in the world? So when somebody takes on the archetype of a performer for a moment, not a specific performer, but the storyteller, the performer, the person who is opening the magic, the person who is playing the notes, and you take it on for a moment without self-assessment, but with pure joy and being authentically you, meaning bringing who you are. That means if I can do this, I do this. If I can do this, and that's authentic to me, I do this. And if I can do this, pen. Or if I can just do this, pen. Or, you know what? I mean, I don't know. It's about, I think it's about the willingness to be visible, or to be the point you said something about the point of light, about not getting in the way. Like, this is, if I'm holding the pen in this moment, I am showing you this pen. Now, I may not be the greatest pen shower in the whole world, and it may not matter, but you may see something in this pen right now because of, who knows why, because of the atmosphere but I'm holding the pen and I'm showing you the pen. And if I can, I don't know where I'm going with this, but if I can authentically just hold the pen for you to see it, that's me performing, and that's me. I don't know.
Well, but I'm having the image now we were talking about the five-pointed star,
Okay.
is that if there's a congruence, if all of who I am is showing up to share the pen in this way, there's an authenticity that if I'm showing up with two parts of me going this way, another part that way, and only two parts going, this is the pen, it's a very different experience for me and the people who are
I
with
see.
me.
So when it's interesting because my teacher Tony, when we did rounds, which was how he would always get us the games that we start for performance, it would always start with just picking. We would each go around and pick up an object and have our focus on the object. That was it. It wasn't like the
That's it.
focus. It was just pick it up, put it down. And what I'm hearing you say right now, and I think this is so powerful, I've never thought about this, is when you are the performer, you are simply creating the focus.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be a focus on you. It
Right.
can be a focus on this note or this pen. And it doesn't have to be done in a certain way. And it's just you're the one who's holding up the pen so that others can see it.
Right. And you're not just holding up the pen, but there is a congruence, an alignment, of flowing in the same direction with all five of those energies that the head, the arms, and the legs symbolize.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yes.
John is saying not getting in the way of the object, to
Yes.
be congruent, authentic, a point of light. I'm thinking that and so, right. So I think what you're saying, Kathleen, is I'm going to play for 20 minutes. That's my goal, and I know what I'm going to play, and then there's all these other things like, am I good enough? They're so good. Do I sound like this person? Those are all the other things. And what John's kind of pointing out is to be congruent with the thing that you're doing instead of doing all the other things that
Yeah.
are not, that are like neurotic or whatever, or fearful, or I mean, that might be not, I don't know, maybe not natural to me, to suspend for a moment all those things that we do to protect and hide ourselves.
Yeah. And for me, the easiest way I do that is, instead of getting caught looking at those things, is if I can just pull my focus back to that point of light, that center in me that I experience that light. And I just put all of my attention and energies to move from that place. Because if I am in my center playing this tune, then what matters isn't necessarily even how the tune sounds or what it comes out, but it's that experience of my own center that's expressing through that tune in the moment. And then all the other things will flow. All of the, all of the beauty, the joy, the sense of freedom, the
Mhm,
creativity,
mhm.
it will flow forth. But if we approach it with, oh, I have to do it this way, this way, this way, we reach for this,
Right,
we reach for this, we go towards that, and we
right.
go towards that, then our energies get split and scattered. And so it comes out split and scattered.
Right. And I'm thinking that for many people, they don't have the tools. It requires not just mindset, but also tools. Like, I notice one of the things I teach in the academy is snippets, little
Right.
tiny bits of music, so that you can actually have presence in the
Right.
moment, and also teaching, knowing that it's okay. It is okay. And like a lot of times people can play part of a tune, but they can't play another part of a tune. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I'm comfortable with doing and teaching is, yeah, that's okay. And here's how you bridge those two things that you can do with something else simple that you can do. And some of it has to do with permission, And some of it has to do with somebody being able to tell you, yeah, it's okay. You can do this. You can just go from here to here. You're not required to fill in every single thing. And so I'm realizing as we talk about this, that creating a performance that connects, which is the class that I'm working towards, has to do also with knowing what's okay to leave out, and how we can keep the focus on that point of light that we are moving around for people, the beauty of that, in a way that we're comfortable with, so we really can show up.
Right. That's right. Yeah. 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 I mean, I was having the image again of the alignment of those 5 points. And of course, the 6-pointed star is the symbol of the macrocosm, where there is that symmetry of above and below and out. And
Interesting.
so if we can, for instance, if I see this arm as my technical skill, if I see this arm as my artistry or musicality, um, and the legs would also have assignments. But if I can stay with the point of light, the center of what I want to express, and let that energy flow here and flow here, and then pull things back from here and pull things back from here, which is what you're talking about. If you have snippets, if you have tools,
you have little tiny bits
if you have little tiny bits, and of course, to come to center is the embodiment practice, is the psychic muscles I teach in the embodiment circle. Then you start from center and you say, okay, yeah, I do want that technical skill.
Wow.
How do I work with that? Or, okay, for artistry, here's this creative bridge that I have. And so then it all starts to work together instead of, okay, I have this idea, but then all this other stuff is floating around out here and I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate it all, and then we get lost.
I love this so much, and we have to end it. I'm just thinking so much of how this fits with structure and pattern, and how how to put it in all parts of life, including music. So I know you're not going to be here next week, so we will not be meeting, but we will be after that. And I just want to thank you, Kathleen, for a conversation. I'm going to be thinking so much about how to bring this into my own life. And thank you, John, for being such a part of this conversation with your comments, and to everybody else who's here and who may not be commenting now, but we know you comment later. And just thank you so much for being part of this conversation and part of the art of conversation, of exploring ideas together that have no right or wrong, but that are about exploring together. Kathleen, thank you. And I can't wait for our next conversation.
Yeah,
and everybody else, look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.